Okay, so our model is pretty much done. What I'm going to be doing now is prepping the UV maps for my model so that then I can later texture it. I'm going to be showing you guys in this video how to also export your model to prep it for the next part of the pipeline, which will be texturing. But before that, we have to UV map our rocket here. Right now, there are certain elements that already have UV maps that we don't have to worry about too much, like the wings and things like the whipped cream. Basically, anything that was made with the sweet mesh that you guys didn't alter, you can keep pretty much intact. You might not have to do this step. We just have to maybe organize the UVs a little bit later on. But for the main steps to UV map our models, I'm going to select everything I want to UV map in this video. And I'm going to delete its history by clicking this little clock icon here, or by going into Edit, Delete All by Type History. This deletes any construction history that may have been created during the modeling process. It's just good ethics to do that every time you finish modeling something, just to avoid any issues later down the road. And I'm also going to freeze my transformations by clicking this little snowflake with 3 zeros at the bottom here. And then make sure that everything is set at its base scale and position. Right now, everything is zeroed out right here. Right. So I'm gonna start. It's basically boils down to 5 to 6 steps that you have to follow in order to UV map a model. The first one being we have to apply or project a new UV into our mesh. Right now, if we were to look at it, it's gonna be a little messy. Actually, I kind of already did this one, kind of, but I'm gonna start over for the sake of the video. So first things first, I like to delete my UVs. Before I get started, this gives me a fresh coat to play with. I know the object doesn't have any UVs because right now if I open up my UV editor, I don't see a checkerboard, everything is grayed out. So I have to project a new UV map into my rocket. So to do that, I can go over to UV, and I like to do a planar projection, but I change the settings from a specific axis and I change it to camera based. I'll just position the rocket in a certain position, press project, and now I'm ready to cut or sew my UVs, right? Be sure to save constantly. UV mapping kind of tends to crash Maya sometimes, so be saving constantly during this process, and always delete your history often to avoid any issues. Right, now that my UVs are projected, now I have to actually unfold them, cut them and unfold them so that it is laid completely flat so that I can project my textures later on. So I'm going to use this little tool right here. This is the cut and sew tool. This is Maya 2022. In Maya 2024, they changed the layout where UV editing has its own custom shelf over here. So you guys might find it somewhere in the top, and these will be your options. Or you can go into UV and use the 3D cut and sew tool. Right? And basically what I'm going to do is thinking about how I would cut this into separate segments to get the result I want. Usually areas that are complete loops that go around the entire model are usually areas you want to generate your cuts by double clicking. If you notice, now my model has some white highlights going around it. This is that there is a cut or a seam in my UVs. I've essentially separated this into 3 separate segments right now. I'm also going to do a cut underneath the rocket, and then I'm going to cut it in half by double clicking. It follows the edge, and notice how it stops just at the border where I created initially. So right now I have 1, 2, 3, 4 cuts or 4 UV shells. Holding right click with the 3D cut and sew tool selected, I can go into right click, components, UV shell, and I'm going to select all my UV shells at the same time. Holding right click again and then going over to unfold and layout basically allows me to flatten my entire model into a 2D space. Right? I'm going to do this for the next pieces. Right? The Hartford is another example. Right now this area it was unfolded, but I'm going to do it again. So it's UV. I'm going to delete the UVs. I'm going to project new UVs by going into planar. And in the case of this model, since it's hollow on the back, I can get away with just unfolding this mesh. And there's minimal stretching, but if I want it to be cleaner, I could separate what would be different materials as well. So I could separate what would be my metal and my glass by just cutting around this area right here. And then doing the same. Right now these areas are separate, and it will make it easier for me to later on apply different textures or different materials in the texturing process. Right? And the cherry, which right now is a subdivided cube. I do believe this already has UVs that kind of work for it. It already has the cut, so I'm just going to unfold this one as is. There we go. I press Control and U or Control Unfold to do the unfolding, or you can go into Modify, Unfold. And here's the little shortcut right here, Control U. What's left, and this would be near the final steps, again, areas like basically anything that was created with a sweep mesh already has UVs. So for the sake of efficiency, I'm not gonna re-project them. It would be proper practice to do so, but since we do wanna kind of get into texturing as fast as possible, I'm not going to be editing these much. What I will be doing is organizing all of my UVs from my objects into a single space. Make sure, right now for the sake of this class, we're only going to be organizing our UVs or laying out our UVs in this segment right here, the specific coordinates, U1, V1, 1001, right? This specific UV tile. To make things a little simpler, right, to optimize it, I'm gonna go ahead and select all of my UV shells. I have to select all of my objects first. I could combine them all, but I wanna keep them separate for now. But I'm just gonna select all of them. Head on over to UV shell, right click UV shell, select all of my elements, go to Modify, Orient Shells. This tries to align them either to a horizontal or a vertical position. I'm just gonna fix those that are kind of a little funky here. This one right here, I'm also gonna rotate so that it's aligned vertically. Select everything. And then I can go to Modify and Layout, or Control L. And then Maya will try to fit all of the UVs relative to their size. And I'm gonna end up with something like this. And notice how the squares try to be as evenly distributed as possible. I can do some manual arrangement here as well. By pressing W, I can move things around. I kind of want to move these over to the corner here. Click and drag to select my UV shells. And I'm positioning them, and I'm making sure that none of the shells are either too close to each other, because I want to avoid bleeding in textures, from the textures into each other. I'm just going to give everything just a little bit of space manually. Right, and this is sort of like a Tetris puzzle. I'm trying to fit things. I'm shifting them around a little, make sure they don't overlap. Okay, this works. Here, I'm gonna move this over here, and this is the cap, so I want to keep this size as is. Something I'm a little hesitant to do because it sometimes stretches the UVs or the textures a bit is flattening out areas like this. I'm gonna show it. I'm going to show the process on how to do it, just in case you guys want to flatten the UVs, but do beware that it could end up stretching some textures. If you're going to have a flat texture, it shouldn't be an issue, but if you want like a specific pattern, maybe the sprinkles in the model might end up being warped whenever we import them in Maya. So I'm gonna personally leave this like this, but if you guys want to have it completely flat to make it a little bit more organized, what I like to do is with my UV toolkit on, I hold right click, I go over to edge, double click to select a specific edge right here. Right now I'm selecting a horizontal one. I head on over to my unfold options and I press straighten shell. Right? This will try to align the specific line to try to flatten it out. And then I select the UV shell this time, right click UV shell, and then I straighten those UVs. And it's going to be a bit of a game of trial and error. Unfolding, this time I'm going to try horizontal one, straighten shell. There we go. This one worked out a little bit better. Beware, do not press Control Z if you're going to be doing this method, because what ends up happening is that Maya is going to undo every single one of these operations right here. Every single UV it's going to undo. So if you guys don't like the result, I recommend that you press Control Z, don't press Control Z, and just unfold, press Control U. And I'm doing a little bit of manual arranging of these UVs that kind of got squashed in the process. There's going to be some UV stretching with this result, but it does make it easier to organize the rest of your shells, right? No curves, looking nice and tidy. And if you notice right now, my computer is going a little bit slow, so I just have to delete that history. Delete history. And now I can organize everything again. A little bit of puzzle solving here. Move that over here. There we go. You can definitely optimize the space a little bit better, but this is fine. For the sake of this exercise, something like this can work. There's definitely a lot of that space we could fill. But for now, I want you guys to keep your models relatively the same size. As you can see, all of my squares kind of fit that same size. If you want varying resolutions in your model, which I don't recommend too much, but for example, if we look at the heart, the little window here, we could make a little bit bigger. And the smaller those squares get, the more resolution I could fit into the specific area. The issue I have with this is that I could have a discrepancy in the resolution, and this could break the immersion of it if I have something that's really high resolution and contrast it with something with really low resolution. So that's also something you kind of have to balance when you're UV mapping, is keeping a consistent resolution throughout your entire model. Right, and that should be it. So now I'm just going to go ahead one more time, delete my history, make sure I don't have any of that construction history for the rest of the project. And lastly, I'm going to include this in this video, I'm going to assign a material. I'm going to be discussing materials later on. But I'm going to go ahead and select all my pieces, right click, assign a new material, and I'm just going to look for a Lambert. Right, in the assign new material panel, you can just press Lambert, and you can change its name over here at the attribute editor. It should pop up immediately when you assign a new material. I'm going to change this to my rocket underscore MTL. Right, very important naming convention right here. I also have to organize the names of the rest of these pieces. But in fact, I'm actually going to combine these. I'm going to deselect all my curves. And I'm going to combine my rocket, going over to my modeling toolkit, combine. Now this is a solid piece. This entire rocket is one solid piece. Delete its history. And I'm going to rename this to my rocket underscore geo. Geo meaning geometry, MTL meaning material. Right? This is going to come in really handy when we're working in texturing later on. And that should wrap that up.